All right, everyone, welcome back. Buckle up, because today we're diving deep into a topic that's been a real head-scratcher for philosophers for centuries: self-knowledge.
Oh, yeah, it's a big one. And I have to admit, when you sent over those readings from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, I was a little intimidated, not gonna lie.
I know, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I thought I had a pretty good handle on self-knowledge. Know yourself, be true to yourself, that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. But wow, there's a whole lot more to it.
It's like a whole universe of thought crammed into this one concept. And it all starts with, like, what even is self-knowledge? We got to define the thing before we can, unpack it.
Yeah, and even that's a debate. I would have said, like, knowing your own thoughts and feelings, boom, done. But the readings get into all these arguments about whether it's more than that, some deeper level of awareness.
Right. Like, is it just having these mental states floating around, or do we really grasp them in a way that's unique to self-knowledge? One of the big things philosophers wrestle with is how self-knowledge stacks up against knowledge of the outside world.
So, like, knowing I'm happy versus knowing that, uh, I don't know, that my coffee cup is blue. Those are different types of knowing.
Exactly. Some philosophers think there's like this special certainty, even authority, when it comes to knowing our own minds. It's different.
That makes sense. I mean, no one can tell me I'm not happy if I really feel it, right?
And that's where these ideas of infallibility and omniscience come in. Infallibility basically means we can't be wrong about our own mental states. And omniscience means that, like, just by having a mental state, we automatically know it. But, most philosophers wouldn't go that far.
Infallibility, really. I mean, haven't we all had those moments where we thought we knew what we felt, but then later realized we were totally off?
All the time. Think about those times when someone's opinion, like, really changed how you saw yourself, and then later on you realized their opinion was totally off base. Or when you're, trying to figure out why you did something and your own motivations are like a total mystery. That kind of suggests there are limits to how certain we can be about our own minds.
Yeah, okay, so maybe we're not like infallible superheroes when it comes to self-knowledge, but still, we have this like gut feeling that we have some kind of special access to our thoughts and feelings. How do philosophers explain that?
Well, one of the classic ideas is introspection, literally like looking inward, right? It's like shining this mental spotlight on your own thoughts and feelings.
Yeah, that's usually how I think of it.
Oh,
But I gotta admit, sometimes it feels like that spotlight's kind of dim, you know? Like I'm trying to grasp a feeling, but it slips away.
that's a great point, and it brings up one of the like fundamental challenges with introspection. Is it really this direct, accurate way of observing, or are we always interpreting, filtering, even constructing what we see in there?
So maybe it's not like looking at an object, more like trying to describe a dream you're having while you're dreaming it.
Ooh, that's such a good analogy. And that actually leads us to another super interesting theory, the transparency method. So this one says that instead of looking inward, we figure out our thoughts by looking outward, basically examining those things in the world that our thoughts are about.
I'm not sure I'm following. How can looking outward help me understand what's going on inside my head?
Okay, imagine someone asks you, do you want pizza for dinner? A transparency theorist would say, instead of doing this deep dive into your soul to search for a pizza craving, you'd think about, like, are you hungry? What did you have for lunch? Are there other options? By examining all those outward factors, you're actually clarifying your internal desire.
Ah, okay. So it's like self-knowledge by proxy, figuring out what I think or feel based on all the stuff that influences those thoughts and feelings.
Exactly. And it like really pushes back against this idea that we have this super privileged direct line to our own minds. Maybe we understand ourselves by understanding the world around us. It's a cool way to think about it.
That is pretty cool. It definitely challenges the whole introspection thing. But you mentioned something earlier about agency being a key concept in all of this. What did you mean by that?
Oh, yeah. That's where things get even juicier, I think. So some philosophers, these are the agentialists, they argue that certain mental states, like especially beliefs and intentions, aren't just like things that passively happen to us. We actively do the believing and the intending. It's driven by our reasons and choices.
So it's not just a feeling, but like a deliberate act. I'm choosing to believe or intend something.
Right. Like when I decide to believe a scientific theory, I'm not just like overcome by a feeling. I'm weighing evidence, I'm thinking about arguments, and I'm actively endorsing that belief because I have my reasons. And for agentialists, that act of choosing, of like taking ownership, is crucial to how we know our own minds.
Whoa, that's pretty powerful. So instead of just observing my thoughts like clouds passing by, I'm actually the one like making the weather, so to speak.
Yes, I love that. And that helps explain why some philosophers see self-knowledge as so intertwined with our sense of self and our ability to act in the world. It's not just about what's happening in our heads, but about how we understand our own agency, our responsibility. It's big stuff.
This is already making my head spin, but in a good way.
Yeah.
But before we get too lost in the clouds, I think we need to tackle this whole first-person authority thing you mentioned earlier.
Ah, yes. First-person authority, that's a big one. It's the idea that when you make a statement about your own mental state, it has like this special weight to it. Like
Yeah.
if I say I'm feeling anxious right now, people usually just take my word for it. They don't demand proof or like start grilling me about my feelings, right?
It's like I'm the undisputed expert on what's going on in my own head. Makes sense.
Exactly. But then the question becomes, why do we have this authority? Does it come from some special kind of access? Like, do we just know ourselves better than anyone else could? Or is it more about, social conventions and how language works?
Wait, so it might not be about actual knowledge at all. It's more like we just all agree to take each other at our word when it comes to thoughts and feelings. That's kind of a mind-blowing thought.
I know, right? And it opens up a whole can of worms. Does that mean our self-knowledge is less certain than we think? Or is it pointing to something unique about how language and social interactions shape our understanding of ourselves? There's a lot to unpack there.
Okay, you officially have me hooked. This is turning out to be a much deeper dive than I expected.
Right. And we're just getting started. There are all these specific theories to explore, each with their own take on how self-knowledge really works. Like, we've got acquaintance theories, inner sense accounts, self-interpretation, transparency, reasons-based approaches, rationalist views. Philosophers have really gone deep on this.
Wow, it's a lot to take in. Maybe we should pick a starting point, like those acquaintance theories you mentioned. How do they explain how we get this special access to our own minds?
Okay, so acquaintance theories, they're kind of a classic starting point when you're trying to understand this whole self-knowledge thing. And they basically say that, we know our own mental states because we have this like direct and intimate acquaintance with them.
Direct and intimate, huh? That sounds kind of romantic for a philosophy theory.
Well, maybe not romantic, but definitely close. Think of it like it's like having this firsthand experience, right? No need for fancy reasoning or like figuring things out. You just know.
Okay, so not romantic, more like, I don't know, just being really familiar with something, like knowing your best friend inside and out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this directness, that's what makes these acquaintance theories so appealing, especially for philosophers who like really buy into this ideal of foundationalism.
Foundationalism. Now we're getting into the big words.
Sorry, yeah, jargon alert. But it's actually a pretty straightforward idea. Foundationalists, they believe that, to have any kind of solid knowledge, you need a solid base, right? A starting point. Like when you're building a house, you need a strong foundation to hold everything up.
Okay, so our beliefs are like a house. I can dig it.
Exactly. And for them, that foundation, it's made up of these basic beliefs that are like so self-evident, so directly experienced that they don't need any further proof. And what could be more basic, more foundational than like the direct experience of your own sensations and feelings?
Yeah, makes sense. But even with those basic sensations, can't we still mess up? Like, what if I don't know, misinterpret a taste? Or think I'm feeling one thing, but it's actually something else?
That's a good point. And most acquaintance theorists would agree that, yeah, we can make mistakes about our own mental states, but they'd say that those mistakes usually happen at the level of like how we conceptualize the experience, not the actual raw experience itself.
So like the feeling is there, but maybe I slapped the wrong label on it.
Right. Like maybe you misunderstand what it means or you get it mixed up with some other feeling. The raw feeling's there, but the interpretation, that's where things can get messy.
Okay, so it's like the feeling itself is pure, unfiltered, but then our brains come in and try to make sense of it, and that's where things can go sideways.
Exactly. And that's one of the challenges for acquaintance theories, right? How do we go from that raw, immediate experience to a more sophisticated understanding of what it all means? Like, how do we fit it into our big picture of ourselves and the world?
Yeah, good question. Like, a baby might feel hunger directly, but it takes a while for them to, like, understand what that feeling means, how to say, hey, I'm hungry. Well, it's not just automatic.
Exactly. So how do we bridge that gap? One way that acquaintance theorists try to do this is through this idea of demonstrative reference.
Demonstrative reference.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm already lost.
No, it's simpler than it sounds. Think about it like mentally pointing at something.
Mentally pointing, like with my brain.
Yeah, you can point with your finger, obviously, but you can also point with your attention. So when you're really focused on a particular feeling, it's like you're mentally pointing at it, picking it out from all the other stuff going on in your head.
Okay, I can kind of picture that. But how does mentally pointing at a feeling help me understand it better?
Well, the idea is that by focusing on it, by giving it your full attention, you're able to grasp its core features, like directly. It's as if the feeling itself is giving you a concept of what that feeling is.
Interesting. So it's like the experience defines itself. No need for a dictionary.
In a way, yeah. Philosophers call this a direct phenomenal concept, a concept that comes straight from the experience without needing any outside interpretation. Pretty cool, right?
It is pretty cool.
Ooh-wee.
But it makes me wonder if we're so directly acquainted with our own experiences, does that make us, like, infallible? Like, how could we possibly get it wrong if we're experiencing something firsthand?
Ah, yeah, that's a classic objection. And it gets to the heart of this whole debate about introspection, how reliable it is, all that. Some philosophers, especially those who follow in that Cartesian tradition.
Hold on. Cartesian tradition.
Mhm.
Remind me who those guys are again.
Oh, right. The Cartesian tradition, it goes all the way back to René Descartes, the I think, therefore I am guy. He was all about the power of reason and like doubting everything until you reach a solid foundation of knowledge.
Right, right. The ultimate skeptic.
Exactly. And for Cartesians, that foundation, it often starts with that direct, unquestionable knowledge of our own existence. Like, I'm thinking, so I must exist. And some argue that the same kind of certainty applies to our knowledge of our own mental states.
Okay, so it's all about that rock-solid foundation. So are these Cartesians saying we can achieve, like, perfect knowledge of our own minds if we just introspect really, really hard?
That's the gist of it, yeah.
Yeah.
But there are plenty of philosophers, even some who like the acquaintance theory, who push back on that idea. They say, look, even direct acquaintance doesn't automatically mean we're infallible. We can still misinterpret things, misremember, or be tricked by our own biases.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, we all know our memories can be fuzzy, and our emotions can definitely cloud our judgment, even about ourselves.
Absolutely. And that's one of the big debates within acquaintance theory is just how reliable and authoritative is this direct access. Even if it is the most basic form of self-knowledge, it might not be as perfect and foolproof as some philosophers have claimed.
Okay, so no easy answers there.
Mm.
But it seems like even if we're not infallible, acquaintance theories still suggest we have this, like, pretty special way of accessing our own experiences, and that's got to be a good starting point, right? But what about those more complex mental states, like beliefs and desires? I can't imagine being directly acquainted with an abstract belief like climate change is real. So how do other theories handle that kind of stuff?
Yeah, that's where things get even more interesting. We start to see a whole range of different philosophical approaches. So, for those more complex mental states, some philosophers propose this theory that compares introspection to perception. Like, we have this inner sense that detects our mental states, kind of like how our external senses pick up on things in the world around us.
An inner sense,
Yeah,
like a sixth sense for thoughts and feelings.
right.
That's a pretty wild idea.
It is kind of sci-fi, right? But the basic idea is that just as our eyes give us visual information and our ears give us sounds, this inner sense gives us data about our internal world, our
Mhm.
thoughts, feelings, beliefs, all that. It's a really interesting theory, but it also brings up a bunch of questions about how this inner sense would actually work. Like, is it really the same as our external senses?
Yeah, I'm already wondering how you'd even test for an inner sense. But before we go too far down that road, you mentioned something earlier about self-interpretation. That sounds a little more, I don't know, grounded maybe.
Right. So self-interpretation accounts, they shift the focus away from just direct experience and more towards the role of reasoning and inference. They argue that we don't just passively observe our mental states.
Hmm.
We actively try to interpret them, to figure out what they mean.
So it's like we're constantly analyzing ourselves, trying to understand why we do the things we do, why we feel the way we feel. It sounds familiar.
Exactly. It's like we're putting together a puzzle, right? Using clues from our own experiences, how we act, how we interact with other people, all of that helps us figure out what's really going on in our heads.
I do a lot of that, overthinking my actions and motivations, trying to get to the bottom of things. But it seems like that kind of self-interpretation could also lead to some pretty big mistakes.
Yeah,
We all have our biases and blind spots.
absolutely. Self-interpretation is definitely not foolproof. We can misinterpret things, jump to conclusions, even straight up deceive ourselves, and that brings up some big questions about how reliable this kind of self-knowledge really is.
Okay, so more questions than answers, it seems. But it sounds like both acquaintance and self-interpretation have something important to offer. They're like two sides of the same coin, highlighting different ways we get to know ourselves.
That's a great way to put it. And that's what I love about philosophy. It's not always about finding the one right answer. It's about exploring different angles, getting a richer understanding of these big questions. And believe me, when it comes to self-knowledge, the questions just keep getting bigger and more fascinating.
Well, I'm definitely fascinated. Speaking of exploring different angles, we still got a few more theories to cover. What about those transparency and reasons accounts we talked about earlier? Those seem pretty crucial.
Oh yeah, those are some real head scratchers. Transparency theories, remember, they suggest that we can understand our own thoughts by looking through them to the world they represent. And reasons accounts, those focus on how rationality and justification play into how we attribute beliefs and intentions to ourselves.
All right, my brain is ready for round two. Let's dive into those and see what other insights they can give us into this whole self-knowledge mystery. Okay, so transparency theories. I'm still kind of struggling with how we can look through our mental states to understand them. This sounds kind of mystical, you know?
It's a cool image for sure. So instead of getting all introspective and focused on our inner experiences, transparency theorists say we should look outward to the stuff in the world that our thoughts are actually about.
Hmm. So, like, if I'm trying to figure out if I believe it's going to rain later,
Uh,
I shouldn't just sit here and, like, analyze my feelings about rain.
right. A transparency theorist would be like, hey, look out the window, check that weather app, think about the forecast. Focus on the evidence, the stuff that will either support or challenge your belief. And that process of thinking about the evidence actually helps you clarify the belief itself.
Okay, so it's like I'm testing my belief against reality, against the world out there.
Yeah.
And that helps me figure out what I really, truly believe.
Yeah, you got it. And it really pushes back against those more traditional views of self-knowledge that are all about introspection.
Hmm.
Instead of assuming that we have this direct line to our own minds, transparency theories are saying, hey, maybe we understand ourselves by understanding the world around us.
I mean, it makes sense, but doesn't it also make self-knowledge a bit more, I don't know, indirect and maybe less reliable? After all, our senses can be tricked and we can misinterpret things.
True. That's definitely one of the criticisms of transparency theories. Some philosophers say that it makes self-knowledge too dependent on how we perceive the world, which, let's face it, isn't always accurate.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So what about those reasons accounts? How do they explain self-knowledge?
Well, as you might guess, reasons accounts put a lot of emphasis on, well, reasons, being rational and having good justifications for what you believe. They say that we know our own beliefs because we have reasons for holding them, reasons that we can think about and evaluate.
So it's not enough to, like, have a belief floating around in my head. I have to be able to, like, explain it, defend it.
Exactly. That ability to reflect on your reasons, to articulate why you believe what you believe, that's what gives you a special kind of insight into your own mind, according to this view.
Yeah, I like that. It feels like it gives us more agency, more control over our own beliefs. But let's be real, we don't always believe things for super solid reasons, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes we're just, I don't know, emotional or biased.
Oh, absolutely. We humans are complicated creatures. Our beliefs aren't always perfectly aligned with logic and evidence. Sometimes our emotions, our biases, our wishful thinking, all that stuff plays a role. Plus, culture, upbringing, you name it.
Right. So how do reasons accounts deal with those, let's call them less than rational beliefs?
Yeah.
Can we still have self-knowledge even when our beliefs aren't perfectly justified?
That's a tough one, and philosophers are still debating it. Some say that to have genuine self-knowledge, your beliefs have got to be based on good, solid reasons. Others say that even those kind of irrational beliefs can still be known, maybe through a different way of accessing them, like introspection or self-interpretation. It's a bit of a philosophical gray area.
It does seem like we keep coming back to this question of whether there's, like, one right way to achieve self-knowledge, or if there are all these different paths, each with their pros and cons.
Totally. And that's kind of a recurring theme in philosophy, isn't it? Maybe there isn't just one answer. Self-knowledge is so complex, so multifaceted, that different theories might be capturing different parts of it, depending on what kind of mental state we're talking about, context, all that.
Yeah, I'm starting to see how complicated it all really is. But we've still got a few more pieces of the puzzle to look at, right? What about those rationalist and agentialist views? Those seem pretty central to the whole debate.
They are. So rationalists, as the name suggests, they really emphasize the power of reason when it comes to self-knowledge. They argue that just by being rational creatures, we automatically have a certain capacity for understanding ourselves. Like they might say that a rational being wouldn't make certain kinds of logical errors about their own beliefs because that would contradict, the whole idea of rationality.
So being rational kind of protects us from being totally clueless about our own minds.
Exactly. It sets some boundaries, on how wrong we can be about ourselves. Now, agentialists, on the other hand, they're really focused on the active role we play in shaping our beliefs and intentions. It's not just about passively observing those mental states, it's about actively creating them and endorsing them.
So it's not just, I know what I believe, it's, I choose to believe this.
Right. And that act of choosing, of taking ownership, that's what gives us this special kind of knowledge about our beliefs, according to agentialists.
It's interesting how they highlight responsibility. Like, we're not just at the mercy of our own minds. We have some power to shape and direct our beliefs.
Absolutely. They'd say that our responsibility for our beliefs and actions is totally bound up with our ability to know them. It's a cool idea, but it definitely raises some questions about free will, determinism, how much control we really have over our own minds.
Okay, I'm starting to see how these different theories all fit together, each shedding light on a different aspect of self-knowledge. But we've got one more account on our list. Expressivism. How does that one fit into the big picture?
Ah, yes. Expressivism. It's a really interesting approach that focuses on how self-knowledge is connected to our ability to express our mental states. They look at those moments when we just blurt out, ouch, that hurts, or I think it's going to rain.
So it's about how we put our thoughts and feelings into words, how we communicate them.
Exactly. And expressivists say that those spontaneous declarations or avowals aren't just reports about our mental states, but are actually direct expressions of those states.
Whoa, so it's not like, oh, I notice I'm in pain and now I'm going to tell you about it. The expressing of the pain is like part of the experience itself.
That's the idea. And they'd say that this directness, this immediacy of expression, gives us a special kind of access to our own mental states, and access that no one else can have.
Okay, I'm starting to see how expressivism fits into this whole tapestry of theories we've been exploring. It's like each one is illuminating a different part of this incredibly complex thing we call self-knowledge.
I love that. It's like each theory is a different lens for looking at this fascinating phenomenon. And I think that's a good place to wrap things up for today. We've covered so much ground, explored so many different ways that philosophers have tried to explain how we come to know ourselves.
It's been quite a journey. And even though we didn't find any easy answers, I feel like I have a much deeper appreciation for the complexity of self-knowledge.
And that's the beauty of philosophy, right? It's not always about finding the right answer. It's about asking the right questions, exploring different perspectives, challenging our assumptions. Self-knowledge, it's not a destination, it's a journey.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And for listeners who are still pondering all of this, here's one last thought to mull over. Imagine a machine, a supercomputer that could predict all of your thoughts and feelings with 100% accuracy. Would that machine truly understand you the way you understand yourself? What does that tell us about the nature of self-knowledge? That's something to think about. Until next time, keep those philosophical gears turning.